think it probably helps if I unmute my microphone. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Adam Levine, and I am the Executive Director here at the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, or NYMTC. As the Downstate Region's Metropolitan Planning Organization, NYMTC provides a collaborative planning forum to address transportation-related issues and develop regional plans through our members' shared vision for the transportation network that connects New York City, Long Island, and the Lower Hudson Valley. Thank you all for participating in today's Brown Bag. Please note that this webinar is eligible for one certification maintenance credit from the American Planning Association. You will find more information about this in the chat. Today we have presentations from Craig Lader, Director of Transportation Planning at the Westchester County Department of Planning, and Monica Ely, Deputy Commissioner of the Fair Fares NYC, Home Energy Assistance, and ID NYC programs at the New York City Department of Social Services. Craig and Monica will present on free and reduced transit fare programs in the New York metropolitan region, the lessons learned in implementing these programs, and the impact they have had on communities across the region. There will be an opportunity for questions following the presentations. Please type your questions into the WebEx chat box, and we will address them during the question and answer portion towards the end of today's presentations. I also ask that you take a moment to let us know via the chat who you are and where you're joining us from. This helps us learn more about our audience and plan for future webinars. Lastly, before I introduce our amazing speakers, I want to briefly mention our next Brown Bag webinar on May 20, which will focus on NYMTC's safety study and its findings to enhance shared roadway safety in our suburban counties. Our Brown Bag series continues on June 10th, when we'll hear from New York City DOT on their Freight Microhubs pilot. More information about the May and June Brown Bags will be announced soon, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again for joining us today, and I will now turn it over to Craig for his presentation. Craig?
Thank you very much, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share this. All right. First off, I want to just thank NYMTC for organizing this Brown Bag event and for inviting me to present on Westchester County's foray into fare-free operations in recent years. Over the next 20 or so minutes, I will introduce you to the Westchester County Bee-Line bus system and the details of the fare-free promotions that we offered. We'll then dig deep into the data to demonstrate the types of analysis that we perform to assess the performance and impacts of fare-free bus operations. The data being presented is generated from onboard automatic passenger counters that our entire fleet of buses is equipped with. We have vigorously tested this APC data and find it extremely reliable, and our reporting capabilities allow us to perform analysis from varying angles to help us understand our passengers' behaviors and to better plan our system. As most of you probably know, Westchester County is located directly north of New York City, bordering the Bronx. We are the largest and most used non-MTA bus system in New York State, with weekday ridership that hovers and occasionally breaks 100,000 daily passengers, with an annual ridership of over 24 million passengers last year. The county owns all Bee-Line assets, including a 325 vehicle fleet of full-size fixed route buses and 2 maintenance garages, and we also oversee over 3,000 bus stops that cover over 59 routes. Bee-Line is operated and maintained under a public-private partnership between Westchester County and Liberty Lines, who, following a competitive procurement process, we recently entered into a new 5-year contract with. We are an affiliate agency of the MTA in regards to fare payments. We are currently still on the MetroCard platform and working towards implementing Omni by the time that the MTA ends sales of MetroCard. As an affiliate agency, free transfers are provided between New York City Transit and Bee-Line, which will continue with Omni. Our fares are typically aligned with New York City Transit, though our current base fare remains at $2.75 for the moment. Intra-county express routes are also charged that standard $2.75 fare, and we also offer one express route to Manhattan, the BXM4C, with a premium fare of $7.50. I should note that in the coming weeks, we'll be kicking off a fare policy study, which will enable us to take a fresh look at our fare structure as we prepare to implement Omni and consider potential opportunities to leverage its technology that could enable more fare classes to be developed for our passengers. And thank you, NYMTC, for the UPWP funding to support that study. A brief look at our system map shows how our service is largely concentrated in the southern half of the county, which is much more densely developed and contains our largest cities. That includes Yonkers, which is now the third largest city in New York State. I've labeled some of our major trip generators, which I will allude to later in this presentation. You can also see the transfer points between Bee-Line and New York City subway. About 25% of Bee-Line passengers transfer to or from New York City Transit subways and buses, and Bee-Line service is designed to facilitate frequent and easy transfers. Before we talk about the parameters and impacts of the fare-free program, I would like to note that the county had a brief prior experience with fare-free operations during the height of COVID. Like many other bus systems, Bee-Line suspended fares from late March until early September in 2020, which enabled passengers to board through the back door and keep their distance from drivers. Based on analysis from this period, it was clear that riders returned to the system more quickly while fares were suspended, and ridership actually declined as soon as fare collection resumed in September, even though the county was continuing to reopen and we would have expected to see an upward trend without interruption. So let's get into the details of our fare-free promotions. The first promotion was announced in 2022 when then County Executive George Latimer sought to offer county residents with relief from inflation and to provide an alternative to driving at a time when gas prices were at record high levels. It covered the period between June 1st and Labor Day. Later in the year, he announced further fare-free periods to coincide with the week of Thanksgiving and much of the holiday shopping period in December. Based on its perceived success and popularity, subsequent fare-free summers were also announced in 2023 and 2024, though those were shorter and excluded the month of May. There was also another holiday fare-free period in the second half of December of 2023, but that was not done in December of 2024. The fare-free promotion covered all Bee-Line fixed route services, including the BXM4C express route with that premium fare. Bee-Line's paratransit system was also fare-free during all times when the fixed route system's fares were suspended. And while we won't be focusing on paratransit at all, I can report that we did see significant increases in paratransit ridership, and it did also create some operational challenges because we didn't necessarily have the capability to accommodate the influx of people that immediately came into that, including people that hadn't used that system in years that were previously registered. It is important to note that the fare-free promotion period did not extend to connecting services, including New York City Transit. So in other words, a passenger transferring between Bee-Line and a New York City subway or bus would have to pay a fare upon entering the New York City Transit system. So I'm going to start by depicting the impacts of fare-free operations on ridership through the years by taking you through the top line data for each of the 3 years that we had the promotion in effect, starting with weekday service. The blue shaded areas of the charts depict the fare-free periods. Looking at 2022, the system was still in the midst of a post-COVID recovery and was also struggling in the first half of the year to meet service due to driver shortages, as was common across the transit industry at that time. Over the first 5 months of the year, our ridership was generally in the 60,000 to 70,000 range. Almost immediately after fares were suspended on June 1st and the promotion began, our ridership jumped significantly, approaching and exceeding 90,000 passengers on certain days. And overall, we saw a 20% increase across the summer fare-free period. Upon resuming fare collection in September, we saw an immediate drop in ridership. That was exceeding the levels from the spring before fare-free service began. We saw similar trends in November, December fare-free periods with short spikes in ridership. A similar pattern emerged in 2023. In the spring, we were averaging about 77,000 passengers on a typical weekday and saw a dip in June as the summer ridership doldrums were about to kick in. It's important to note that historically, Bee-Line ridership was about 8% lower in the summer than it was in the spring months, and this late June dip is indicative of that long-standing trend. However, the suspension of fares once again resulted in an immediate jump in ridership, averaging well over 90,000 passengers across the summer, with some days exceeding 100,000 passengers, which was the same level we were at in the pre-pandemic days. Overall, we saw a 22% increase in ridership in the fare-free period, which was slightly higher than the prior year. However, compared to 2022, we did see a more precipitous drop in September after fare collection resumed, though the data suggested we retained riders from the fare-free period. By 2024, the third consecutive summer of fare-free operations, it was becoming clear that the fare-free trends that had developed in prior years were well established and consistent. While the percentage increase was a bit lower in 2024 at only 15%, the 87,000 passenger springboard was much higher. This makes the summer fare-free statistics even more impressive, as we were now serving more than 100,000 passengers on most weekdays. You'll notice a dip in early August, which aligns with a flooding event that severely impacted much of the county and disrupted bus operations over the course of a few days. While this was a historic event, weather does impact ridership, and we have observed that a generic rainy day can impact discretionary trips, and our ridership is often 5 to 10% lower on days with inclement weather versus those days with good conditions. Interestingly, we saw a smaller drop-off in passengers once fares resumed this past fall, only about 3%. This may be reflective of the last of the post-COVID return to prior ridership levels, where September would see more riders in the summer if not for fare-free operations. You'll also notice that there was no December increase in ridership like 2022 and 2023, further speaking to the fact that these fare-free promotions attracted passengers during those times. Let's take a brief look at Saturdays, where we saw a more extreme version of the impacts we saw on weekdays. In 2022, we started with a base of about 35,000 passengers, and within a few weeks of suspending fares, we were again serving over 50,000 passengers, which was nearly a 50% gain. Unfortunately, many of those passengers ceased to ride once fares were collected again, but we still saw a 20% increase in riders in September compared to that spring before fare-free promotions started. So clearly, some riders were retained. The impacts in the holiday season were more muted, but were still observable in terms of increases. The Saturday picture in 2023 was similar, as we saw about a 40% gain in the fare-free period. While still very impressive, we noticed that ridership plateaued at about 60,000 a few weeks into the fare-free period. Perhaps we were maxing out our potential ridership. We saw a more significant drop of ridership on Saturdays in the fall of 2023 compared to the prior year, but that is almost certainly due to weather. You may recall that nearly every weekend that autumn saw rain, and that played out in the data in which fall ridership was lower than in the spring. And 2024 was more of the same. Again, we were starting at a much higher base of passengers of nearly 50,000, and we plateaued at around 65,000. Still, a 26% gain in the fare-free period is not too shabby. In the fall of 2024, when the weather wasn't the same issue as it was the prior year, ridership reverted back to spring levels rather than below it. And quickly, Sundays behaved very similar to Saturdays in each of the 3 fare-free summers. In fact, the increases witnessed in 2022 were nearly identical, but even more impressive than Saturdays, exceeding 50%. And that was followed by 25% losses in the fall and modest holiday gains. In 2023, Sunday gains were slightly lower than Saturdays, but still significantly exceeded the percentages gained on weekdays. The same plateauing effect at about 37,000 passengers is also evident, as was the impact of poor weather over weekends in the fall. And then 2024 followed a similar pattern, with fare-free gains on Sundays averaging about 36% and peaking at about 40,000 passengers. And that fell to about 30,000 passengers after free fares ended. So all in all, the data strongly suggests a real positive measurable impact of fare-free promotions on ridership, with weekend service being the biggest beneficiary given the likely relationship to discretionary trips that otherwise wouldn't be taken if fares were being charged. The data implies that fare-free promotions do encourage passengers to be introduced or reacquainted with the system, and there is some evidence that a segment of fare-free passengers did become paying passengers. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that by the summer of 2024, our fare-free ridership actually exceeded our pre-pandemic ridership by significant amounts on weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and likely contributed to our fall 2024 averages now being in line with that of fall 2019 before the pandemic. But fare-free impacts go beyond just the overall ridership levels, as passenger behavior is also clearly affected. This is especially evident by visualizing the ridership for each hour of a typical weekday. This graphic depicts the data for 2022. The blue line shows data from May, where fares were being collected, and in June, when fares were suspended. During the fare-free period, the gains were across the board except for the morning peak period, suggesting that the additional passengers were discretionary in nature as opposed to daily commuters, with the highest gains seen in the midday hours. The same pattern was borne out in 2023 and even more pronounced. Ridership was lower during the fare-free summer in the AM peak, and the PM peak was now slightly later in the 5 p.m. hour. Most notably, the curve in the midday was much flatter, speaking to the ridership gains seen during this time. And 2024 confirmed these trends with an even bigger gap between spring and summer evident in the midday period and in the PM peak. Ridership was higher by an impressive 42% in the 11 a.m. hour, and we added over 1,000 passengers per hour nearly every hour between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. This is very compelling data and suggests that there is latent demand for midday service that may be impacted by fare elasticity. Our data also strongly suggests that passengers use the system differently during fare-free operations. Each year of our promotion, we saw average passenger trip lengths decrease for all service periods by about an average of 8%. We compared our data for the fare-free summer periods to the spring and fall periods of the same year, and the data was very compelling and consistent, showing the decrease in the summer when fares were suspended and reverting back to normal levels once fare collection resumed. We believe this is likely a result of people choosing to hop on buses if one happens to be passing by, or perhaps people making a different modal choice knowing that they don't have to pay for a shorter trip that they may otherwise make on foot. And we actually observed this with passengers who use the bus to travel within the Cross County Shopping Center, which is our major shopping hub in the southern part of the county in Yonkers, where on video we saw people getting on at one side of the shopping center and people getting off on the other side. It was an interesting phenomenon to witness. Fare-free impacts varied by destination as well, and supports our hypothesis that discretionary trips are most likely the basis for most of the ridership gains during fare-free periods. On weekdays, our major hubs and inter-system transfer points generated more impressive gains, while employment destinations languished comparatively. And most notably, gains at New York City subway transfer points were comparatively lower, which is almost certainly because the passengers that transfer were not able to benefit from a free trip upon using New York City transit services. Again, weekend data showed similar impacts, and in most instances, fare-free impacts for all major trip generators are proportionally comparable across each summer when we had fare-free promotions. Higher impacts were observed in downtown areas and near transit hubs, except for Mount Vernon for reasons that we still have not been able to determine. And the number of people using the bus to connect to New York City subway also had comparatively minimum gains, which is not surprising. We also looked at the data from each of our different types of services. Our operating profile varies significantly given the number of routes that we operate and the varying types of operating environments. We broke out our services into 3 types of route groups for our standard fixed route services for this analysis. High frequency routes that operate with the shortest headways and longest spans of service and operate 7 days a week. Our core routes, as I'm calling them, that operate at least 6 days a week and have levels of weekday service conducive to transit dependent populations that rely on Bee-Line exclusively, and infrequent routes, which tend to operate only on weekdays or have headways over 60 minutes during significant portions of our schedules. These are more of our coverage routes. We also looked at our express routes and our commuter routes that provide time connections to Metro North and that operate in a peak directional manner on weekdays only. Somewhat surprisingly, our ridership increases during the fare-free periods were consistent among our fixed route services, whereas we were expecting that we would see lesser gains on our infrequent routes. What wasn't surprising was that the commuter and shuttle routes saw no gains whatsoever, further confirming that passengers who use those services are not sensitive to fares and that there were likely other factors limiting ridership on those services, most likely a lack of frequency or a lack of convenience or imperfect timed connections for the trains that our passengers may be looking to transfer to. The top line figures for express routes are actually a bit misleading. they lag the rest of the system in terms of fare-free impacts. The lone exception, however, was the aforementioned Manhattan Express route, the BXM4C. Seeing the value in free trips on this route that is normally $7.50 per trip, passengers flocked to this service, causing ridership to swell by 78% each summer we offered free trips. And that 78% was the same percentage each of those 3 years. And this presented huge operational challenges for us, as capacity on this route is limited due to coach-style buses being used and standees not being permitted as it traverses the Major Deacon Expressway. So in order to accommodate the newfound demand, we had to add trips and have helper buses in place. And we still had to occasionally pass by waiting passengers due to full buses before the express portion of the route began, especially in the mornings heading southbound during the earlier portions of the day. When looking at on-time performance, we were curious to see whether the increases in passengers would slow buses, or if that would be offset by the reduction in dwell time that typically results from the fare collection process, meaning payment by MetroCard or coins. And clearly it was the latter. The data for all years showed a small but readily apparent improvement, with the amount of late buses dropping 5% on average when fares were suspended. This does create some challenges from an operations perspective, since we want to avoid buses running ahead of schedules. Notice also that on-time performance is significantly worse than that of the spring or the summer in the fall. That is because that is only in part due to fares being reintroduced. We typically see travel times peak in the fall and improve in the spring, and these statistics bear that out. Obviously, there's a financial component to any decision to eliminate or suspend fares, and it can't be discounted how significant this cost could be. For Westchester, it was fortuitous that the county had some budget flexibility, since it had been the recipient of COVID relief funds, which are now fully exhausted. Nonetheless, it is estimated that the fare-free promotion provided about $4 to $4.5 million in savings to passengers each month it was in operation, but the cost of the county was likely less, as this figure includes passengers that otherwise wouldn't be using our system, and didn't include the realities we are seeing now with bus fare collection rates significantly lower than they had been historically, when our average fare was $1.64, which is also because we have different types of fare classes and reduced fare options for certain populations as well. On the other hand, the Bee-Line system generated about 19 million free rides during the 3 years in which fare-free promotions were offered, and there is significant value to measures that were intended to reintroduce the system after COVID and to support our loyal passengers, the majority of which are from lower income households and members of disadvantaged population groups. Overall, and I hope the presentation made it clear and compelling, the fare-free promotions generated generous gains in ridership and impacted the average travel distance of passengers and the distribution of passengers across each hour of the day. Midday and afternoon service saw the highest increases, as did weekends, while the ridership on the AM peak period services that focus on work commutes barely budged. And as an added bonus, system reliability saw improvements through better on-time performance. I can't say definitively whether the findings I presented are unique to Westchester or may be more widely applicable to bus systems across the NYMTC region and beyond, but I would think that planners can use our case study to offer a real-world example of how one system has been able to show consistent results over a 3-year period as an indication that the impacts we presented aren't a fluke. When I first looked at year-to-year data, it was a bit surprising to me that the results from the first year carried forward to the second year, but by 2024, I would have been surprised if this weren't the case. At the end of the day, as we now prepare to begin that fare policy study that I mentioned, these findings will be invaluable as we dig deeper into the nuances of fare policy and how to best serve our constituents in Westchester County with a fare policy structure that could work even better. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to field any questions at the conclusion of the next presentation.
Thank you, Craig. That's a great presentation. I've got a couple of questions myself, and I saw there were a couple in the chat, so we'll hold off on those until after Monica's presentation, but I know we'll certainly have several questions for you. So next up, Monica Ely, Deputy Commissioner of New York City Department of Social Services. Monica, are you there?
Greetings, everyone, and thank you to NYMTC for inviting me. As introduced, I am Monica Ailey, and I'm here to share the Fairfares NYC program with you today. Fairfares NYC is the New York City Department of Social Services Human Resources Administration Transit Discount Program. With Fairfares NYC discount, eligible New York City residents can receive 50% discount on local and limited buses, subways, and accessoride fares. Next slide. Fairfares NYC was birthed from an aggressive campaign to then New York City Mayor de Blasio and City Council Speaker Johnson from many community-based organizations that highlighted the need for low-income New Yorkers to get assistance with transit fares. However, as noted in the campaign, other municipalities hosted similar reduced fare programs. Those programs are generally hosted by the municipalities' transit agencies. Fairfares is unique as it is hosted by the local Department of Social Services. Next slide. So between 2016 and 2018, there were many conversations and a deal was struck to fully fund the Fairfares NYC program. Next slide, please. So the current eligibility for the Fairfares program is pretty much working age New Yorkers between the ages of 18 and 64, living at or below 145% of the federal poverty level, and not receiving transit benefit from either the MTA or HRA. So just noting that, that DSS HRA provides full car fare for clients receiving other services. So that's why this is an eligibility requirement as well. And noting that there is no immigration status requirement for the Fairfares program. Next slide, please. As one of DSS HRA's newest programs, Fairfares in its short history has undergone many changes and has not yet reached steady state. Fairfares NYC launched in 2019 with known DSS HRA clients who were receiving cash assistance and or supplemental nutritious assistance or SNAP benefits, and were living at or below 100% of the federal poverty level. This population would later become known as a fast-track population. I'll explain what that means a little later on in the presentation. During the same year, Fairfares expanded to other city agencies who could also confirm the eligibility of individuals through data matches, like the New York City Housing Authority, or NYCHA, the City University of New York, CUNY, and the Department of Veterans Services. As you guys may know, HRA has relationships with these agencies, and of course, they also collect information on income, and was easier to actually make those connections for eligibility for this program as well. So these individuals were targeted based on data matches, and we were confirmed that they met the eligibility requirements for the program. There were no applications at that time. We sent out letters. People were asked to log on or create an account on our front-end portal, which is Access HRA, and enroll into the program. And by December of 2019, we had about 100,000 individuals enrolled in the program. And in January 2020, we launched our online application on Access HRA. And of course, you know what happened in March of 2020, there was a full shutdown due to COVID-19. And then in July of 2020, we also added the accessoride population to the Fairfares enrollment process. And despite launching during the pandemic, by August of 2020, we had over 200,000 enrollees. And then 2023, the city baseline fare fares into the city budget. And we implemented a higher income eligibility at 120% of FPL. And at that time, we exceeded 300,000 enrollees. And in 2024, we implemented a manual pilot for Omni, and we enrolled about 200 of our Fair Fare participants, conducted training and focus groups on how to best communicate the changes with Omni to our participants, and then was able to inform our current rollout for Omni. And then we also, City Council had also added additional funding to our budget also in 2024. And this year, we're current 2025, we also increased our income eligibility to 145% of FPL. And we have implemented the rollout of full expansion to Omni for all Fair Fare participants. And we are now at about a little bit over 370,000 enrollees. Next slide, please. So Fair Fares was designed as primarily an online application. 98% of our applicants apply online. And we have two interfaces, one which is, I mentioned before, is Access HRA, but we also have our Access Fair Fares, which is, a portal that is proprietary to the Fair Fares program. And to that end, because we have such a large online presence, we have a very small customer service presence, but we have one office per borough. As noted before, there are two types of applicants for the Fair Fares program. One is Fast Track. These are people who are known by DSS HRA to be eligible based on the enrollment in cash or SNAP. And we do a back-end data match. And so when they log into their Access HRA account, they see an enroll now, and they do not have to submit an application. They can just enroll into the program, therefore reducing the administrative burden for the clients to have to upload documents. And the other type of application, or the other type of applicant, is an open enrollment applicant, which those folks are not known to DSS HRA and are required to submit a full application and documents to prove eligibility for the program. Next slide, please. So I shared a lot of the milestones for enrollment to the Fair Fares program during the timeline. But what I would like to share here is the steady growth of the program. So like I said in prior slide, by the end of 2019, Fair Fares had amassed 100,000 enrollees through that data match process, which included HRA clients, NYCHA residents, CUNY students, and DVS enrollees. And despite launching open applications in 2020, Fair Fares realized steady growth through COVID because many of our population are frontline workers who are required to report to work in person during the pandemic and could not be transitioned to telework positions. So they needed this discount, and it came through for them. Although there was a suspension in fares, they still realized the benefit of this program. And then also in 2023 and in 2025, just a few months after the implementation of the higher income eligibility, you also see in this chart the steady increase in enrollment after those implementations. Next slide, please. This slide shows the demographic makeup of our fast track population. This information is made available through the reporting of from the other applications, namely this Cash and Snap applications. Just noting that the demographic information of fields are not required in the Fairfields application, and therefore it's not necessarily completed by most of our applicants. So it's easier and better to present from the fast track enrollees. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how Fairfields enrollment follows the trajectory of the income eligibility changes from 100% of FPL during the program's inception to this current 145% FPL effective this January. And you'll see in this chart that most of our enrollees are concentrated in the poorest communities throughout the city. And it appears that our program is fulfilling our goals, that we're actually enrolling the people that need the program the most. Next slide, please. So as a program, we are highly motivated to measure our effectiveness. And to that end, we have a voluntary survey embedded in our application process. And here is a summary of expectation among applicants and first-time renewers in our 2020 survey. And they responded to various statements on how the Fairfields discount would improve their quality of life across multiple dimensions. And as you can see, those who renewed the discount, which is the first group of people that enrolled in 2019, had a very positive response to the discount. So as you see, they were less stressed about their financial situation. They were able to travel further away from home to get job and look for work. And again, they were able to save time on traveling because a lot of folks were actually, walking to work. And you're going to see a little bit later on with some of the freestyle responses on how actually the Fairfields discount is affecting people's lives. Next slide. So there were over 1,500 applicants' responses, about 20% submitted free text comments, and the majority of them were very positive about the Fairfields program. The text written in white were from our 2022 responses. And as you can see, that the program is assisting the population for which it was intended, working class and those looking for work, and those who are trying to improve, single mothers, as noted in the demographic slide, which noted our enrollment is mostly female and those with disabilities, right? So as you see, someone wanted to take English classes, but they weren't able to pay their fare. So now they have a discounted card and they are able to go to class every day. People are grateful, and as a single mom, they were choosing between transportation or lunch. And here you have someone that's saying that because of their mobility challenges, having this discount allows them to travel more. So just this kind of is talking toward this discount allowing our clients to afford and make a better way to get around the city and actually make the goal of the program more apparent. Next slide. And then this is the renewers' responses, and 1/4 of the renewing responses were submitted free text, and almost all were enthusiastically endorsing the program. Again, single mothers as saving money. It makes me feel valued as a lifelong New Yorker, just like, something that is just for them, right? Again, the trade-off of having to walk to work because they didn't have enough money to get, and then this is again prior to the transit fare increases. And so, having to drop children off and then get to work and having other changes. So, this is kind of just talking toward, how the card is being used and the value of that. Next slide, please. And so last year, we had an Omni pilot where we assisted clients with setting up Omni accounts, and we shared useful information about, how to protect their balances. And then 4 months after, we set them off, we had them come back to share their feedback. And, this is the feedback they shared with us. And we used the information that they provided to inform our staff training, some system designs, and to inform our frequently asked questions. But again, just, making sure that we are targeting the right group and making sure that we have the right information for our clients. And next slide, please. And so as of February of this year, we have ended the distribution of MetroCards, and we have started the transition of our clients from MetroCard to OmniCards. So anyone who is enrolling new and or renewing their membership into this program is receiving an OmniCard. Anyone who is requesting a replacement card because it was lost, stolen, or damaged will receive an OmniCard. And anyone who is amidst their enrollment has the ability to log into the Access HRA account and request to transition to Omni as well. And then if someone is, in the neighborhood and they walk into an office, they can also request the transition to Omni. So we plan to fully transition our entire enrollment by the end of the year, in time for the MTA's removal of the MetroCard vending machines, and have all of our enrollees take full advantage of their discount beyond 2025 with no interruptions. All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Monica. That's really great. I think there have been a couple of questions put in the chat. We'll get to the questions on your presentation soon, but let's go back to questions for Craig. Stephanie, do we have questions for Craig in the chat?
Yes, we do. We have some questions that about the ridership, how you measure ridership during the free fare period.
Thank you for that question. Because we have our automatic passenger counter data that we are constantly collecting, we're able to actually do a comparison between the period in which fares were not collected and the period that was collected, using in which our operations are essentially the same. So same schedules, the way that our runs are constructed and operated are the same. So it's really able to allows us to do an apples to apples comparison, where as soon as the fare free operations went into effect, we were able to take, say, if they went into effect in July, we were able to take the last few weeks of June, compare them to the first few weeks of July, taking out any of the holiday periods, and really do a direct comparison. And to confirm that our analysis was accurate, we expanded that as well to look at broader periods. So, for example, May and June of 2024 compared to July and August of 2024, May and June being when fares were collected, July and August when they weren't. So that really, I think, gives us a good foundation, since we know that we have reliable data, to be able to do those apples to apples comparisons.
Thank you. And the next question was about the Sunday ridership slides. It was the 2022 slide, was rolling 2 week, while 2023 and 2024 is rolling two day. Was it actually day on the first slide, 2022, or was it rolling week? I think that person just wanted clarity.
Yeah, I realized that I wasn't consistent. So It was week to week because obviously it's if you're covering if you're analyzing the data over the course of a couple of months, you don't want to you're looking at Saturdays in particular. Let's say you want to compare just Saturdays, and you want to be able to not just use one in case there's an anomaly with the data, in case there's, say, a weather event or something like that. So that's why we did it over a rolling average over 2 weeks, because generally we're looking at about 9 to 11 weeks of data for the fare-free periods in 2023 and 2024. So it's essentially the same thing, but I understand the confusion. I apologize for the inconsistency there.
Another, I think this might be the last question on our presentation, Craig. Do you think the ridership increases during the free fare periods were due more to, one, increase in affordability, or two, the lack of transition barrier for a new rider in terms of figuring out the fare system?
If I had to make an educated guess, I think it's more about the affordability. I think there may be some that may find it much easier to not have to figure out how to pay, and especially in 2024, as MetroCard distributions seem to wane around here, that would obviously make it harder, and no one likes carrying around 11 quarters in order to pay. But I think it's more the reality of when you offer a free product, people are more inclined to use it, and it allows people to do it with little or no risk. And I think the best example of that is I talked about our express route, and that is a route that as soon as we lifted the fares, we just saw that almost doubling of ridership there. People who are otherwise probably commuting, because this is a peak directional service, because we saw the highest ridership during the height of the peak periods during normal traditional 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 5:30 work days, the buses that make those trips. And as soon as that ended, those numbers fell back to earth as well. So I really do think to a large degree it is about the cost itself and the affordability. And as I mentioned, we do have a population, a ridership population that is particularly lower income, and a lot of transit dependent riders who use the system. So I think that's a combination of factors, and they're more inclined to use it when they don't have to pay.
Great, thank you so much. And Adam, did you have questions before I go to Monica's?
I do. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity there, Stephanie. Thank you. So Craig, I was curious, looking at the slide that you showed where it was the destinations, it looks like, as you discussed it, it's a lot of discretionary. It looks like a lot of discretionary riders added. It looks like they're going to some of the shopping centers in the area. I was a little surprised to see Empire City didn't quite get represented as highly as I might have expected initially, but certainly, the other shopping districts. Was that generally what you noticed, or were there other major destinations?
Yeah, I think it was a little hard to be able to discern because, as I said, there are some surprising elements to this data. Empire City, I think, is more of a destination. It's not necessarily as much of an employment destination as it is a recreational destination. And it didn't seem as if people were flocking to there more so just as a result of the barrier being lifted in terms of having to pay a Bee-Line fare if they're, say, transferring from the New York City subway system, which I think a lot of passengers are likely doing. Cross County Shopping Center is definitely a place that benefited. We don't have, and the route in particular that serves the Cross County Shopping Center serves Central Avenue, which is our main retail corridor in the county. So we did see some relatively strong gains there, but nothing that was earth-shattering. But again, I think it was more interesting to see how those shopping retail destinations compare to, say the downtown areas and where our hubs were, where we did tend to see a large concentration of our passengers using the system more. accepted Mount Vernon. And as I said, I can't for the life of me figure out why the ridership there was less likely to be moved by fare free than, say, in the New Rochelle area, where we saw much higher gains. So you could only figure out so much just based off of the data, and sometimes the patterns don't necessarily speak for themselves.
Okay. Thank you for that. The next question is completely predictable, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Doing some back of the napkin math, $2.75 per fare, 90,000 fares a day, 365 days a year, million people in the county. It's about $90 per person to make this a kind of a permanent plan. I'm wondering, what are the barriers to future and or expanded implementation? I assume it's money, but
I think very much money is the driving factor. I think budgetary concerns are always going to outweigh everything else, and there's always that argument to be made that public transportation is a public good, and you can make a philosophical argument that we should be offering free fares. I think the reality is that we rely on those revenues. Our fare recovery rates are on the higher side as it relates to most bus systems. So I think that would be really a difficult pill to swallow if we were to lose out on that and to be able to extend it all across the year. And I think obviously there's a lot of uncertainty coming up in terms of where we're going to be with funding. It's not even clear with the New York State budget that's about to be issued if we're going to see some increases in state operating funds, which we really need to be able to support our baseline operations. So I think that's why it would be really difficult to be able to offer this on a regular basis. The COVID relief funds definitely were helpful and gave us more flexibility to be able to do this. And I think it was meaningful for the county's overall economic benefits as well, because we always like to say Bee-Line is an economic generator for the county, because so many people do rely on it, especially for commuting purposes to and from work or employment. So we'll see if something changes, but I don't know that this is going to ever be expanded in that way.
Understood. Looking forward to the kickoff and results of that fare study that you're going to be doing. So thank you, Craig. All right, let's move to Monica. Stephanie?
Yes, I'm hoping people can hear me. My audio
Yep.
is acting up a little. Great. Okay. Two questions. One was just confirming what HRA stood for, and people were saying it's for Human Resources Administration.
That is correct.
And great. So the first question is, if they understand correctly, what you're saying is that MTA is getting rid of MetroCard entirely. Will Bee-Line, Path, and AirTrain also be transitioned to Omni by that time?
That is my understanding. However, I cannot speak for the MTA.
Thank you.
I will just add that for Bee-Line, that is what we are aiming for. And we're well aware of the timing for MTA to stop selling MetroCards or allowing for refills of MetroCards. And we are on a pathway to being able to have Omni in place by the time that occurs.
Thank you. So there's another follow-up question. It's a two-parter, so if you need me to repeat it, just let me know. What is New York City specifically, not just the MTA, what are they doing to increase awareness of fair fares? And what percentage of people who are eligible for SNAP and other programs you mentioned are enrolled in fair fares? That's the first part of the question. The second part is the program remains very undersubscribed and eligibility low relative to other cities. Have you given any thought to making enrollment automatic?
So for the first part of the question is there are campaigns and media that's coming out in the next few months, and we have had a lot of outreach over the last few years, and there has been a lot of outreach to other agencies as well, as and alongside our MTA partners, we have done a lot of outreach. So there is a lot of information. It's just people not uptaking. I can't make people sign up. That's kind of what the part of the problem is, right? It's just, there is information out there. People know about the program, as witnessed by the 300,000 people that are enrolled. And so, yes, there are outreach and media campaigns coming, and we continue to have those. And as they come out, people will enroll. And the second part of the question is,
I can repeat it, no worries, that was a long one. The program remains very undersubscribed and eligibility is low relative to other cities. Have you given any thought to making enrollment automatic? Did that go through?
so,
Sorry.
so there is some, based on the cash and snap enrollments, virtually it's frictionless because people are coming into their cases for other reasons and they can just click enroll now, right? So there is that virtual automatic or frictionless enrollment possibility there. I'm not sure what you mean. Can I just allow everyone in the city to enroll in the program based without any basis on eligibility? I'm not sure what that means. No, I have not. There is not a thought process there. No.
And from what I can tell in the comment, it was more about people who already are eligible for SNAP, or when they do those other programs, for them to be automatically enrolled in the fares. I think that's what they were saying. Like when they enroll, for example, in SNAP or what have you, to automatically get enrolled in fares. Is that something?
So it's a little different now that we're rolling people in the Omni, so they have to agree to those Omni rules and conditions, and we want them to be aware of them. So I don't know that we can automatically enroll them without them making them aware of that.
Sure.
So, we can. It's a possibility. Let me think about it, and let's go to the drawing board.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just so you all know, I put the APA continuing maintenance credit link into the chat at the APA website for one continuing education credit here. And I believe that is all the chat questions that we have. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, my questions are going to be kind of in the same realm, Monica, so I'll hold off on those. But I did have an observation, which is I thought it was interesting when you put up some of the survey results that saving time was actually on the lower end in terms of people feeling either they strongly agree or they agree. And that makes me think they were probably Ubering or lifting around the city and or taking a cab and spending a lot of money, or just walking because that's all they could afford. And that just speaks to how life-changing this program could be, because people, can spend, as you talk about, can actually eat instead of having to pay for the transit fare full price. So it's definitely a wonderful program.
Or conversely, they didn't value the time, right?
Right.
It's another way to look at it.
Yeah. So many great benefits from this program. So I thank you, Monica. Thank you, Craig. This is really great. Really appreciate your time and sharing this information, and hopefully we'll help spread the word about the Fair Fares program, get more folks to sign up. And thank you again. Again, as Stephanie mentioned, the information is in the chat for anybody that wants to get a credit. Stephanie, did you have any closing remarks before we say goodbye?
No, that's it. Just the credit link is in the chat. So feel free to get a credit for this.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, Monica. Thank you to the team here at NYMTC. And we'll see everybody next month with our safety study in the suburban counties.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Sure.